pretty much like we thought they would go there in terms of bringing things back. And so it will take some time, but by and large, I think this is a temporary condition, not a long-term kind of thing. You know, Apple is fundamentally strong, and that's how I see it.
Do you anticipate disruptions to last past the second quarter?
Well, our second quarter is a quarter we're in, just to be clear with our investors, right, is the March quarter, your calendar first quarter. And so I don't know the answer to that yet. We're still in February, and, you know, there's reason for optimism, but we'll see. You know, I think the focus in the last few days have turned off of China onto Korea and Italy. And so I think it's very important to see what happens there and whether something new comes out of that. Our supply chain is relatively more important in China, but we have great businesses in Korea, and we have suppliers in Korea as well, and suppliers in Italy, and a great business there as well. So we need to see as that unfolds.
Well, the stock market obviously is reacting, and Apple has been down in the past few weeks. For someone that creates value inside America's largest company, do you think there's value that investors are missing?
Well, my perspective, first of all, I don't really focus on the short-term gyrations of the market. I think for me, and with the way we run the company, we work for the long term. And I see no long-term difference between what was happening 4 weeks ago versus what's happening today. And so now the market takes time to recognize that and so forth, and it'll do what it's going to do. And I'm the last person to be able to predict it. But I would, you know, for me, I look through the noise and concentrate on the future. And the future looks very bright.
You might be able to get Apple at a discount, at a 15% discount.
We are a buyer, right? You know, we have a share repurchase planned, and so, yes. This
might be an opportunity to maybe up those share repurchases for Apple.
I don't want to announce anything on the air, but everybody knows that we're buying shares, and if the stock is lower, you buy more shares for the same amount of money. So
now you're the architect of this low inventory, fast-moving supply chain that Apple currently has. Do you have any, I guess, ideas to maybe bring back or move some of that supply chain outside of China more?
Well, it is important to recognize that our products are built everywhere. I mean, they are truly global products. And so you have several parts that are made in the United States that serve the world. So not only for the iPhones sold in the United States, but those sold around the world. And so what will happen to the supply chain as we look back on this? I wouldn't want to say at this point, because the question for us always is what kind of resilience did the supply chain have? It's not, was there a problem? Because there will always be unpredictable things that come up. But as you know from following us, we've worked through earthquakes, tornadoes, fires, floods, tsunamis, SARS. And so we've had a long list of things, and the operational team is very deep at working through these. And so the question for us after we get on the other side will be, was the resilience there or not, and do we need to make some changes? My perspective sitting here today is that if there are changes, you're talking about adjusting some knobs, not some sort of wholesale fundamental change.
So you don't anticipate then moving, say, to other low-cost countries like the Vietnams or the Cambodias? Because some people have called this an inflection point for China's manufacturing industry, especially with the disruptions that have been caused, and people are uncertain at this point because China's not cheap anymore, let's be honest, right?
Yeah, that's the thing that people don't understand, I think, is that there's a perspective that is that China is, but it hasn't been for a long time, as both of us know. And so, but for us, we're not really fixated on cost only. Cost is one factor, clearly. but we're also we're fixated on quality. And we're focused on time to market and the speed and the depth of engineering in the different places. And so somebody would have to meet all of those in order for us to do something.
Yeah. And announcing also your first retail store in India by the year 2021.
Yeah. I'm excited about that because I see India as a huge opportunity for us. For years, we could not enter there unless we entered there with a partner into retail, and we did not want to do that. You know, we want to maintain control over our brand and so forth. But the administration worked on this with the Indian government, and that change has been made. And so we are very, very positive about entering in there online this year and retail next year.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of the administration, I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but when people see Tim Cook on one side, Donald Trump on the other, they see a lot of difference. But you have been able to engage and work together. So how does the relationship work?
Well, there are differences. There's no doubt about that. But you look for intersections. And I care a lot about creating jobs. And I think the president does as well. I care a lot about training the workforce for the future. And the administration is really focused on this as well. I think one of the U.S.'s major challenges is to solve this issue. It's that as technology speeds over and over again and jobs are disrupted and jobs are created, we have to make sure our education is preparing people for the disruption and the creation. And I think if we do that, we can flourish in this environment. But if we don't, we leave a lot of people behind, and that should be unacceptable for all of us. And so these are just two of the things where there's intersections. And I think most people would say those are nonpartisan. You know, the creation of jobs should be nonpartisan. The education should be nonpartisan. And so that's how I see it. You know, we're very focused on policy, not politics. That probably helps. I think we don't have a PAC. You know, we're probably the most non-political company out there. We don't give to political campaigns, candidate campaigns, and so forth. But we do focus on policy because we want to be a contributing citizen of the United States and to help the country every way we can.
Mm-hmm. Now, some would say that you were probably one of the first, if not the first, in Silicon Valley to reach out and engage with the White House. Recently, Larry Ellison of Oracle held a fundraiser for President Trump, receiving a lot of backlash from his employees. Have you received any sort of criticism for trying to engage and work with the White House from your employees?
Well, we have a large employee base, and people are welcome to have the views that they have. But I try to do what I say and say what I do, right? And my perspective is engagement is always best. Because just simply standing on the sideline and yelling doesn't accomplish anything but polarization. And so I want to suit up and play a role. And if I disagree on something, I want to try to influence it. If I agree on something, I want to try to amplify and figure out a way that I can help in some way and be a great citizen of the country. So that is my perspective on things and the way that we try to lead the company.
Tim, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
So a neutral, some would say sober figure at the head of America's largest company. And the sense I got was that there wasn't a lot of panic when it comes to coronavirus and what's happening in China. As he said in that interview, some suppliers and factories have been reopening. In fact, they had to shut all 42 stores during the worst of the coronavirus in China. But now more than 30 have reopened, some with limited hours. And we've been here before. You know, Tim Cook has been CEO of Apple since 2011. He's seen a lot of this, ups and downs. But as you see with the stock trading, above record highs, or were at record highs earlier this year, he's been able to expand that value despite the fact that you do have slowing phone sales.
Yeah, you know what's kind of interesting about his whole low-key approach, that it invites more people in on both sides and avoids some of the acrimony, let's say, that Jeff Bezos is experiencing at the White House. But that's his style, isn't it?
Yeah, if you ever meet Tim Cook, you will know that he's just he's a welcoming figure. He will talk to anybody.
Doesn't shout,
he doesn't shout, yet not very loud,
right.
But he is very smart and he's very attentive with his words and his voice. And as you saw with this education initiative, that's what we were trailing him for this give back to the community in this educational initiative to empower some of the unserved parts of the communities, especially in Birmingham, Alabama, which was pivotal, as we know, in the civil rights movement, but also 70% African American, and Alabama has one of the widest gaps when it comes to the jobless rate between blacks and whites. So coding for the future and also empowering the workforce so they can get ready for an automation future as well.
You know, this is me reading into things. A remarkable interview, Susan, but when he talked about being, heavily reliant on China and that workforce to make a lot of the stuff that he has, it looked like he had toyed around with spreading the wealth around in the region and just didn't like those alternatives, and he liked, say what you will, of the rising cost of that China labor. It's well worth it because they do a great job.
Well, technology know-how. People don't understand that China isn't cheap anymore.
No.
And the reason why they're not cheap is also you've had also a, shall we say, an increase in the value add and technology know-how. So they're able to build the glass sheets that you put on the phones. They're able to build some of the chips that go into this and put it all together as well. But he has been spreading it more around. It used to be more than 50%, the number or the proportion of iPhones that are assembled in China. But that's been reduced. However, it's still, I would say, heavily reliant and still on the factory floors of China, right?
Yeah.
But will that change? What sense did you get? Because I got the sense that maybe there might be other alternatives in the future, but just not right now.
There might be, but he's not freaking out, which is refreshing. He's a very thoughtful, deliberate man. And these days, that's a nice asset to have, right?
Well, especially when you're looking at markets down, what, four digits now?
Yeah,
like
right. And his own stock now technically in bear market territory, even though it's at an appreciable run up, to your point. I look forward. There's more of this, right? So at 3 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to see more. Can you tease what we have to look forward to?
Well, as I mentioned to you, we got a lot of access to Tim Cook and followed him throughout his journeys to schools and his surprise visit to an Apple store in Birmingham, Alabama. If you want to take a look at Rockstar, when he walks into any of these stores, and I've seen it a few times already, I mean, people scream and there's just a lot of commotion.
How many CEOs does that happen to?
Exactly. And also to these schools where these kids, they're 7, 8 years old, and they all know who Tim Cook is.
Yeah.
I mean, how many CEOs get that type of recognition and ask, 8-year-olds asking for selfies in Birmingham, Alabama, or really anywhere, right?
It is so rare. I remember the late, great Lee Iacocca, when he had assumed the reins of Chrysler and became this international rock star, he was surprised when people would ask him for an autograph. And I remember one kid telling him, "I see you on TV all the time."
Right.
That was enough. Susan, great job. I can't wait to see the rest here. The fact of the matter is,